Something has shifted in Thailand in 2026. Spend 5 minutes inside the expat Facebook groups and you'll see the panic. People talking about the visa crackdowns, rising insurance costs, and the 800,000 baht sitting in the bank, and growing fears that retiring here is becoming harder than ever. Some are even asking if Thailand retirement dream is quietly coming to an end. But is this really a crisis, or is it simply another moment of fear, confusion, and misunderstanding online? Today we're cutting through the noise, no drama, no scare stories, just the reality of what retirees and long term residents actually need to understand about staying in Thailand in 2026. If you're already living here, planning your move, or wondering whether Thailand is becoming too complicated, this video may save you a lot of stress, confusion, and possibly a costly mistake. Because here's the truth. Many people may be worrying about the wrong thing entirely. The real issue isn't always the paperwork. And before the video ends, I'll explain the one mindset shift that often separates people who build a stable life here from those who end up frustrated, angry, and thinking about leaving. So let's start with the question many people are asking right now. Is there really a Thailand visa crisis? So is there really a Thailand visa crisis? If you spend time reading comments online, you could be forgiven for thinking the answer is yes. Every day you'll see the same concerns appearing. Insurance, rising living costs, the 800,000 baht requirement, immigration paperwork, and growing fears that retirees are slowly being pushed out. Some people feel Thailand is becoming harder. Others believe the government no longer wants ordinary retirees. And when you see dramatic headlines and heated Facebook debates, it's easy to understand why people feel unsettled. Because for many people, this isn't just paperwork. This is their home here, their future, the life they've worked towards for years. And when rules appear uncertain, anxiety follows. But this is where things can become confusing. Social media can be helpful. Sometimes you learn valuable information, but it can also magnify fear. One rumour becomes 10 opinions. One immigration story becomes a prediction that everything is changing overnight. And before long, people begin assuming the worst. I've seen this happen before. Every few years, a new wave of concerns appear. Sometimes justified, sometimes exaggerated. Usually a mixture of both. And that's why it matters to slow down and separate emotion from reality. Here's the reality as I see it. Thailand is not shutting the doors on retirees, but the system does appear to be evolving. Increasingly, Thailand wants long-term residents who are financially stable, properly documented, and capable of supporting themselves. In other words, the dream may not be disappearing, but the expectations around it may be changing. And to be fair, this isn't unique to Thailand. Around the world, immigration systems are becoming more structured. Governments want visitors and residents who contribute, follow the rules, and place less pressure on public systems. Whether we agree with every rule or not, that's the direction many countries are moving towards. So perhaps the better question isn't, is Thailand ending retirement? Maybe the better question is, are retirees adapting to a changing environment? Because for some people, Thailand still offers extraordinary value. Climate, lifestyle, healthcare, community, and a quality of life many still struggle to find elsewhere. But adapting now may matter more than ever. And nowhere is that reality hitting harder than with one issue that keeps appearing in my comments: insurance. If there's one topic that creates anxiety amongst retirees in Thailand, it's probably insurance. I see it constantly in the comments. People asking, what insurance do I need? Am I too old? Are prices becoming impossible? And what happens if I can't qualify? And to understand the worry, you have to remember something. Many retirees moved here partly because Thailand offers a more affordable lifestyle, lower living costs, good healthcare, and for some, a chance to live more comfortably than back home. So when insurance costs start rising or requirements appear confusing, people naturally become concerned, especially later in life. Now, this is where a lot of the confusion begins, because not all retirement visas operate in exactly the same way, and many online discussions mix different visa categories together. One common area of confusion involves the OA retirement visa and the non-O retirement route. Depending on the visa type and current rules, insurance requirements may differ. And this is where I want to encourage something very important. Never rely entirely on Facebook comments for immigration advice. Immigration rules can change. Requirements may differ depending on your visa type and your circumstances. So always verify current information through official channels or trusted professional advice. The key point here is simple. When people hear you need insurance, they sometimes assume every retiree faces exactly the same situation, and that simply may not be the case. But there is another issue that deserves an honest conversation: age. Because for retirees over 70, insurance can become more and more challenging. Premiums rise, pre-existing conditions matter more, coverage may be limited, and in some cases, people begin wondering whether maintaining insurance is financially realistic at all. This is where the frustration becomes understandable, because no one wants to feel punished simply for getting older. And for some retirees, this isn't theoretical, it's a real financial pressure, one that affects peace of mind and long-term planning. Now, this isn't financial advice, and everyone's situation is very different. But there are strategies many retirees explore to manage costs more realistically. Some look at higher deductible plans, others focus on inpatient only coverage. Some compare providers carefully rather than automatically renewing. And many discover that understanding exclusions and fine print matters just as much as the headline premium. The cheapest policy is not always the safest, but the most expensive one isn't automatically the best either. This is one area where doing proper homework can save considerable stress later. But insurance isn't the only issue causing concern. For many retirees, the bigger emotional reaction comes from something else entirely: money, and more specifically, the 800,000 baht requirement sitting quietly in a Thai bank account. Now let's talk about the issue that may trigger more debate than almost anything else: the 800,000 baht requirement. Because for many retirees, this is about more than money. It's about freedom, control, and sometimes frustration. I understand the reaction. People work hard for the savings, they carefully invest, they budget, and then they hear you may need a significant amount sitting inside a Thai bank account, not growing aggressively, not being actively used, just sitting there. And naturally, people ask the question, why? You'll often hear people describe the money as frozen, dead money, locked away, and emotionally, I understand why people say that, particularly for retirees living on fixed incomes, or those watching inflation slowly eat away at purchasing power. For British retirees especially, frozen state pension concerns and rising costs can make financial planning feel increasingly tight. So when you combine living expenses, insurance, exchange rates, and visa requirements, the pressure can feel very real. This is why these conversations matter, because behind every visa discussion, there is usually a human story. But it is also important to understand the logic behind the system, whether people agree with it or not. The purpose of financial requirements is generally straightforward: Governments want reassurance. They want confidence that long-term residents can support themselves, manage emergencies, and avoid becoming financially vulnerable. Again, this is not unique to Thailand. Many countries apply financial requirements in one form or another. So the question becomes less about whether the rule exists and more about how people choose to view and manage it. Here's one way I think about it. Instead of seeing the 800,000 baht purely as trapped money, perhaps it helps to view it differently. Not as lost, not as punishment, but as a safety net, an emergency reserve, a medical protection fund, a layer of financial stability that sits quietly in the background. Does everyone like that system? No, of course not. But sometimes changing the mindset around a problem makes the burden feel different. And for many retirees, peace of mind has value too. But here's where things get interesting. Because for some people, retirement may no longer be the only path worth looking at. And that brings us to a growing conversation around alternative visa routes, including the DTV and the longer term options for certain lifestyles and income levels. Now, this is where the conversation becomes interesting, because retirement visas are no longer the only path people talk about. In recent years, Thailand has introduced other long stay options, and naturally, many people are asking, is there a better way? A simpler way, a way that avoids some of the frustrations we just discussed? And the honest answer is sometimes yes, but it depends entirely on who you are, how you live, and whether the visa genuinely fits your situation. One visa receiving a lot of attention is the DTV, the Destination Thailand Visa. This was designed around a different lifestyle: remote workers, freelancers, people earning from outside Thailand, and those with more flexible working arrangements. For some people, particularly those who still work online or maintain overseas income streams, it may appear attractive: longer flexibility, multiple entries, and a different approach compared with traditional retirement routes. But this is where caution matters. The DTV is not a retirement visa, and it doesn't automatically suit everyone. Eligibility, documentation, and individual circumstances still matter. So before assuming this is a shortcut, people need to understand what the visa is actually designed for. Then there's the LTR, the long-term resident visa, and this sits in a very different category. Higher financial requirements, longer term residency, and generally aimed at wealthier individuals, investors, and certain professional groups. For those who qualify, it can offer stability and less headaches. But realistically, this is not the route most ordinary retirees will pursue. And this brings me to something important. Sometimes people spend months searching for the perfect visa, hoping there's a loophole, a hidden trick, or a way around every requirement. Usually there isn't. The visa that works best is normally the one that honestly matches your lifestyle and circumstances, not the one social media says is easiest. Because at the end of the day, there may be different paths, but there is no magic visa. Every option comes with requirements, paperwork, responsibilities, and trade-offs. And perhaps that brings us to the part many retirees find hardest of all. Not the money, not even the paperwork, but the simple reality of dealing with bureaucracy. Now let's talk about something many long-term foreigners eventually experience in Thailand: bureaucracy fatigue. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just fatigue. Because living here long-term sometimes means paperwork, immigration visits, documents, reporting requirements, and occasionally frustration. Whether it's the 90-day reporting, visa renewals, changing requirements, or simply trying to understand what applies to your situation. The process can sometimes feel tiring. I understand that. Most long-term residents probably do too. Another reality people have noticed in recent years is closer scrutiny, greater enforcement, and less tolerance for what some people used to call visa runs or creative shortcuts. Thailand appears increasingly interested in making sure people use visa categories as they were intended. And again, whether people welcome that or not, it does seem to reflect a broader direction. More structure, more verification, and fewer grey areas. For some people, that feels uncomfortable, particularly if they remember a looser system years ago. But this is where I think perspective matters. Thailand can be frustrating at times, no question. Sometimes the paperwork feels excessive, sometimes the rules feel unclear, and yes, there are days when immigration is probably not everyone's favourite activity. But I also think we need to remember something important. We're all guests here. Thailand is under no obligation to make immigration effortless. Every country decides who stays, under what conditions, and for how long. And perhaps the paperwork, the reporting, the bureaucracy is simply part of the admission price, the trade-offs for living somewhere many people still dream about. And this leads to an honest question, not about visas, but about mindset. Because if immigration rules create constant anger, constant stress, and constant resentment, then maybe the issue isn't only paperwork. Maybe it's about whether the lifestyle still feels worth the trade-offs. And that brings us to a question some retirees are quietly beginning to ask. If Thailand feels harder, should they be looking elsewhere? Now here's a conversation that seems to be growing. Not everyone is asking how to stay in Thailand. Some people are asking something different. Are there any better options, cheaper options, easier options? And to be honest, that's not an unreasonable question. Rising costs, changing visa rules, insurance concerns, and simply aging naturally cause people to reassess their plans. Because retirement overseas isn't a decision you make once. It's something you are continually adapting to. And sometimes people begin looking at alternatives. Interestingly, many people aren't necessarily looking to leave Thailand altogether. They're simply looking differently at Thailand itself. Places with lower costs, lower pressure, and perhaps a quieter pace of life. Prambury gets mentioned more often now. Smaller coastal areas, less tourist-focused locations. Places where pensions can stretch a little further. And for many retirees, that adjustment makes perfect sense. Not everyone needs the same Thailand. Sometimes changing location solves problems more efficiently than changing countries. Then there's Vietnam, a country that increasingly appears in retirement and expat conversations. Lower living costs in some areas, energy, growth, and a different lifestyle experience. Some people find that appealing, but comparisons are rarely simple. Every country comes with trade-offs. Healthcare, language, bureaucracy, culture, infrastructure, community. What works beautifully for one person may feel completely wrong for another. Which is why I always believe something. Choosing where to live is deeply personal, and there is no universal answer. And then there is the option people sometimes avoid talking about, going home. For some retirees, that decision eventually arrives. Not because Thailand failed, but because life changes. Health, family, grandchildren, age, or simply the desire to be closer to familiar surroundings. And I think that's important to say. Leaving Thailand does not mean failure. Sometimes it simply means priorities changed. But here's my honest view. If Thailand frustrates you every single day, if immigration creates constant resentment, if the bureaucracy feels unbearable, then sunshine alone probably won't save the experience. Because no country is perfect, and eventually lifestyle has to outweigh irritation. So after everything we've discussed, visas, money, insurance, and changing realities, where does that leave the Thailand dream? Before we finish, I want to touch on something many British retirees raise in the comments: frozen pensions. Because this issue quietly affects financial planning far more than some people realise. For British retirees living in countries where UK state pensions are frozen, annual increases may not apply, which means over time, inflation slowly changes the picture. And that matters, especially when we're discussing insurance, healthcare, exchange rates, and long-term affordability overseas. Now, this isn't unique to Thailand, but it does remind us of something important. Retirement abroad is not simply about finding cheap living. It's about long-term planning, stability, and being realistic about how finances may change over 10 or 20 years. Because what feels comfortable today may need adjusting tomorrow. And this is exactly why conversations around visas and retirement planning matters. Not to create fear, but to help people prepare properly. So after everything we've discussed, insurance, visa options, bureaucracy, financial requirements, and changing expectations, where does that leave the Thailand dream? Personally, I don't believe the dream is dead, but I do think it may be evolving. Thailand still offers something many people value deeply: climate, lifestyle, healthcare, community, and for the right person, a very good quality of life. But perhaps more than before, living here successfully now requires preparation, flexibility, and realistic expectations. I've always believed something: Thailand rewards people who adapt, not people who expect perfection. Because every country has trade-offs: costs, rules, bureaucracy, compromise. The question is simply whether the lifestyle still feels worth it to you. The Thailand dream may not be ending, but it may be changing. And one last thing, if you need help navigating any of this, you can contact me at my email. I reply to all of them. You don't have to definitely do this alone. I can point you in the right direction. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the comments.